On September 20th, Mewtwo will be in the Tier 5 raid pool for raid bosses in Pokemon Go. Rather than being an EX raid exclusive, everyone will have immediate access to these Mewtwo raids, which is pretty hype. Obviously, some of you might be wondering how to best beat down this Mewtwo. We got friendship bonuses now, so that kind of changes things a little bit as far as which Pokemon are good, what movesets are good, and what their breakpoints are. Also, if you're a returning player, maybe you don't have a whole bunch of the best options and you want to know what your second best options are for beating down Mewtwo. Well, I cover all that and a bit more in my live stream, SwagTips, and this is a clip from the live stream where I cover all that, so enjoy. So Mewtwo raids, starting on the 20th, Mewtwo is going to be a normal Tier 5 raid boss. So that's like exciting for a lot of people, and I know that there's a large population that are kind of miffed about it because, oh, well, I went through all that work and effort to get the EX raids on the Mewtwo's and now they're available for everyone. I think this is something that a lot of players saw coming, but to kind of sweeten the pot for the OG players that already have Mewtwo's, they are now making Shadow Ball and Hyper Beam a EX raid exclusive move on Mewtwo. So any Mewtwo's that you currently have, you're going to make sure that just about all of them have Shadow Ball, and then have at least one that has Hyper Beam. Hyper Beam sucks on Mewtwo. I mean, it's, I guess, better on Mewtwo than other things, but it's Mewtwo's worst move. But Shadow Ball is quite literally Mewtwo's best attack right now. I mean, depending on what charge move you want to use for Mewtwo, it's going to determine, like, it's going to be based on what matchup you're up against. But Hyper Beam, definitely one of the worst. Shadow Ball, definitely one of the most coveted ones. So you're going to make sure that you get some Shadow Balls on your Mewtwo's before the cutoff on the 20th, when you are no longer able to get Shadow Ball or Hyper Beam. Psychic is still going to be an excellent move. It's going to be the best move for it to use against fighting types like the Machamp Raid. Yeah, so Psychic's going to be great against the Machamp Raid still, and Focus Blast is still going to be good for a normal type counter, like beating down the Blissies. But missing Shadow Ball is going to be a pretty huge hit for Mewtwo going forward as an attacker. People that missed out on Shadow Ball, it's definitely going to be like the Shadow Claw of Mewtwo, if you will, for a lot of people. So yeah, make sure you get Shadow Balls on your current Mewtwo's. Thinking about that though, kind of interesting, if Mewtwo loses Hyper Beam and Shadow Ball from its move pool, that means it can only know 2 charge moves. And right now in Pokemon Go, aside from Mewtwo and Mew, I'm pretty positive all Pokemon have 3 possible charge moves. So Mewtwo has been an anomaly, being able to know 4, and maybe it'll continue to be an anomaly, only knowing 2. But I think there'll be a replacement charge move in Mewtwo's move pool for the non-EX raid Mewtwo's. So I'm kind of interested to see what happens with that. Some people are thinking it's going to be the Psy Strike, the Mewtwo's like signature move, and that is possible. They gave Moltres its signature move, Sky Attack. Sky Attack was originally Moltres' signature move in the olden days, and then over time it opened up to more Pokemon, but Psy Strike is a possibility for Mewtwo to learn. Right now there's no Game Master information or any inkling on what this third charge move could be. There hasn't even been an announcement that they're replacing the charge moves at all, so no confirmation on that either way. I just think it's very likely or reasonable, I would think, that Mewtwo would get a new attack, so we'll have to see what that is. And Mewtwo, being this all-powerful Psychic-type Pokemon, has a wide variety of charge moves that it could replace that with, so definitely no telling what it could be. The only thing that we could even imagine would probably be Psy Strike. After that, like, the sky's the limit. It could learn ice attacks, electric attacks, fire attacks. Mewtwo, lots of hype going there. And when it gets that third move, if it gets the third move, well then that's more content for me to do. So Pokemon Go, writing my content for me. So right now we have a graph here. Mewtwo counters all movesets. This is level 40 Pokemon versus the Mewtwo Raid. All movesets that Mewtwo can know averaged. So every simulation for Confusion plus any charge move, or Psycho Cut plus any charge move, all the results for all the counters to them averaged together to give you a kind of holistic view of what's good against Mewtwo. So overall, the best counter to the Mewtwo fight, you should probably already know this, since that, not much has changed. Mewtwo's been out forever now, right? Yeah, Tyranitar. Tyranitar is your ace in the hole Mewtwo counter. Just wrecks Mewtwo, resists all the attacks except for Focus Blast. The best counter, 75% of the time. pretty dang good, and Tyranitar pretty easily obtained. And one of the biggest claims to fame to Tyranitar is how it's as good, if not better, than everything else at very low levels. All these simulations here of everything that's not Mewtwo, and I guess arguably Gengar, these are all at level 40. And this is a level 24 simulation for Tyranitar with Ultra Friendship, but this is level 24 Tyranitar with Bite and Crunch, and it's performing as well, if not better, than all these other level 40 counters. So that's really huge for Tyranitar. If you don't have any Tyranitars, then I suggest you try finding people to trade to get those Tyranitars. And if you're a newer player or a returning player and you've got those August of 2016 Pokemon and you don't have 10 lucky Pokemon, if you meet those two conditions in a trade, like you have less than 10 lucky Pokemon and the Pokemon you're trading is a summer of 2016 Pokemon, well then that will auto lucky for whoever you trade with, which means you'll for sure get a lucky Pokemon and the Pokemon you trade them will for sure be lucky for them. So there's some purchasing power there for returning players. So maybe use that to try to get a couple Bite Crunch Tyranitars, because these are going to be huge for the Mewtwo raids. Additionally, Mewtwo is a extremely excellent counter to Mewtwo as well. It doesn't have as many resistances as Tyranitar, but it does resist that Focus Blast moveset, which is the one that Tyranitar doesn't like. Mewtwo, and this is with Shadow Ball, so you have 4 days at the time of this live stream. Maybe when this is on YouTube, you have no more days to get the Shadow Ball on Mewtwo. But if you could try to find somebody in your community, if you are lacking Mewtwo's to trade, even though trading for an exclusive Shadow Ball Mewtwo is kind of a stretch, if you have that auto lucky 2016 purchasing power, that does give you a little bit of a leg up. But yeah, if you're wondering about the asterisks on the red numbers, the Psycho Cut ones, that's just indicating that those aren't breakpoints. It's just meant to parallel the breakpoints for confusion, letting you know that, level by level, Psycho Cut is still the better attack. That's why there's a little distinction there. And Confusion does have a best friend breakpoint here, which does put it a little bit ahead of Psycho Cut in terms of DPS, but I think the difference isn't that large at all. I think at the end of the day, you're still going on the side with Psycho Cut. But for like the true max minners out there, if you have a best friend in the raid, over the next month, the Mewtwo month, people will be able to reach best friendship. And if you got a maxed out, like Perfect IV Mewtwo, I think this is like level 39.5 on the Confusion for the best friendship, and you're big in the max minning, well, I guess you may as well shoot for that. Now, both of these counters are excellent for the Mewtwo raid, but they don't have the highest DPS. It's huge for a lot of people out there. They really want that best DPS, and that's why we got Gengar up here in the clouds. The best one being the Shadow Claw, but that's a legacy move, a highly coveted legacy move. In fact, down with TP, the Kevin from the Game Press team, Trust the Cones on YouTube, he is pretty crazy about the Shadow Claw Gengars. I don't know if I can really share some of the stuff that he has done for Shadow Claw Gengars, but I know I think he's still looking for Shadow Claw Gengars. So, DM him if you, want to see what your Shadow Claw Gengars are worth. But yeah, it's the Shadow Claw Gengar, exclusive attack on Gengar. It's the legacy move. Top DPS against Mewtwo. 36 being the, the latest breakpoint for it. So yeah, 36 is the latest breakpoint for the Shadow Claw. Once you start dipping below 36 to the lesser breakpoints on Shadow Claw, well then you start to fall more in line with like Tyranitar and Mewtwo's DPS. And since Gengar is a glass cannon, faints pretty quickly, even against moves that it resists, I think you'd really be missing out on a lot if you didn't power up your Gengar all the way home to like 36 or higher with the Shadow Claw. So that's why I decided to cut off at 36. Then down here we got Sucker Punch with Hex, and they both have the same Ultra Friend breakpoint of 34, which I found to be pretty interesting. And then running the simulations, they're basically the same in performance. Like, I think there's like a couple weird sims where one beats out the other and they flip-flop, so it's like always like circumstantial. But overall, in general, the two dots, the 2 points on the graph end up basically on top of each other. So Sucker Punch, Hex, whichever one you like better, good, secondary moves for the Gengar. Puts your DPS more in line with the Tyranitar Mewtwo levels, but still higher than other Pokemon. And at the end of the day, if you don't have a bunch of Tyranitars or a bunch of Mewtwo's, or maybe you're up against Focus Blast and you've got a bunch of a bunch of Tyranitars, but you want some other options because Tyranitar faints right away against Focus Blast, well, that's what Gengar's here for. And then below the level 34 breakpoint, we got Gengar's ugly cousin, good old Zipper Mouth over here, Bandit. Pretty good option still as far as DPS goes, but definitely kind of sinking a bit lower. So maybe if you got a perfect, shiny, maxed out Banette's your favorite Pokemon, those are plenty of good reasons to use it in the raid. But I think you might want to be looking a little bit more to the right to the better options here. Now another Pokemon that I think is pretty underrated for this fight, and I mean for obvious reasons, its DPS isn't all that hot. We have Lugia down here, and Lugia has a lot going for it. It's got an immunity to resistance to the Focus Blast, it resists the Psychic, and it's a very, very tanky Pokemon. It doesn't hit for super effective in any way, but Dragon Tail is an excellent neutral fast move, and Sky Attack is one of the best neutral charge moves in the game. So if you don't have these better Pokemon, I'd say Lugia is definitely worthwhile to bring in the raid. For a lower level player especially, a Lugia will probably put in more work than other subpar kind of Pokemon, because Mewtwo has a lot of KOing potential, especially with the confusion sets, which is like 50% of all Mewtwo's are going to have confusion and just ruin you every time with confusion, right? So when it comes to less dedicated players, new players, returning players, their re-lobbying time is pretty low. Generally speaking, them not fainting out, actually getting charge moves in, stuff like that is pretty big for them. So I think Lugia, especially for that population, is pretty good. For all populations, I think sliding in at least one Lugia, if you know you're not up against Focus Blast, pretty good idea. But if you got a whole bunch of the other options, by all means, go for them. Now, aside from all the premium counters here, we got this whole cluster of other Pokemon that work out pretty dang well. My favorites from this list are going to be Pinsir, Houndoom, Scizor, Rayquaza, and Dragonite. I think overall, doubling down on Rayquaza or Dragonite would probably be the better option, since they're good in a whole bunch of other raids. Putting a whole bunch of chips on Houndoom or Scizor or Pinsir, could come to bite you in the long run, as far as Stardust management and stuff like that. But if you already have a wild caught Pinsir, Houndoom, or Scizor, high level or something like that, then they're going to be very excellent options. I think one Pokemon that a lot of people are going to have at a high level, especially if they're not super into Pokemon Go, is going to be the Gyarados with Bite Crunch. That's another good option there. And of course, you got this whole cluster of other Pokemon to look at, like Moltres and Raikou and Kyogre, and got a Alolan Muck and Mew. If you got the right moves on Mew, you're going to need that Shadow Claw for sure. Or maybe Snarl, but it's going to be a trick to get the right movesets on Mew. But yeah, a whole bunch of other good options here. So this is the Mewtwo Raid against the Focus Blast moveset set. Confusion Focus Blast for that extra threat. And no dodging, Ultra Friendship again. If anything, this is one Mewtwo moveset we will for sure fight, since it's not on the chopping block as far as getting taken out of the move pool for Mewtwo here. So, Focus Blast. This is the set that really hurts Tyranitar, which is why you don't see Tyranitar all the way out here on the right. Yeah, you go all the way down to the left here, and Tyranitar's DPS and tankiness is in league with Pinsir, Scizor, and Banette. This is to suggest that even against the worst case scenario, this is the moveset that just poops all over Tyranitar. Worst case scenario, Tyranitar is still battling with the best of them. It's still as good as a lot of other counters in the raid. Here we got all these maxed out Pokemon. Level 35, I tried to make this clear, but it's not that clear, is in league with a level 40 Tyranitar. So if you got high level Tyranitars, still very good option for this fight, even against the Focus Blast. It's going to get one shot, but you're still going to get those crunches in. And level 24 Tyranitar isn't all that bad either. So as far as powering up Mewtwo counters, if you just put all your chips down on Tyranitar, 25% of the time you'll come across Focus Blast, and if you're not teched for that, then you're going to have to spend a couple more revives, but it's not going to be the end of the world. So perfectly reasonable doubling down on Tyranitar. Gengar, definitely looking a little bit more swaggy in this fight because it's got the triple resist on the Focus Blast. Very good option to use Gengar there. And then you got Mewtwo with the resistance. And yeah, once again, Psycho Cut, very often better than Confusion. This is the best friend breakpoint for Confusion, and it's going to be ever so slightly better than Psycho Cut. But another thing to keep in mind is that the Psycho Cut doesn't have a best friend breakpoint, but the Shadow Ball would still be more powerful with the best friendship. So if you really think about it, best friend Psycho Cut is still better than best friend Confusion. I just don't have best friend Psycho Cut up here because there's no breakpoint for Psycho Cut with best friendship. That's a mouthful. Sticking with the Psycho Cut, very good option. Here you can also see the full merits of the Lugia come into play, all the way at the bottom right. Super tanky option. So lacking better Pokemon, if you can't get a Shadow Ball Mewtwo, that's just not an option for you. I'd say investing in one solid Lugia, at least one solid Lugia. Very good idea, especially since we have Machamp raids. You can do Machamp solos, and doing the Machamp solo with a Lugia is like a dream. Super easy to do with that. I think it's a highly underrated Pokemon. Every Pokemon Go player, if they can, should have at least one powered up Lugia. Got me on camera with that one, and now I saved the stream recordings, so this is forever now, forever now, forever now. Yeah, you can access this at any time. My video editor can't wash it away. Another thing to note about the Focus Blast set is that Rayquaza and Dragonite are a bit better here, and same with Gardevoir, because Gardevoir gets the double resist, being Fairy and Psychic type. So other good options for this raid. If they get the Windy boost, they're even better, so that's something to keep in mind. I don't have weather boosted breakpoints on here, my bad. But yeah, Rayquaza and Dragonite, definitely very good options for the Mewtwo raid, especially against the Focus Blast. Yeah. Alright, so we got Mewtwo counters, Shadow Ball moveset, so Confusion Shadow Ball, that's the raid that this is simulated against, and all these different counters up against that Mewtwo. I'm pretty sure that we're still going to see Shadow Ball in our raid fights. It's not confirmed. I don't know for a bona fide fact. Considering that the birds had different moves to obtain when you fight them, but they still had all the same moves that they usually have in the raid, I think we were going to have that same situation with Mewtwo. So, and Shadow Ball is the moveset to beat after Focus Blast, so very important to be prepared for that raid. So where Tyranitar fell before, Tyranitar is now swaggin', with a single resistance to the Shadow Ball. Very obviously the most excellent option for this fight. Basically everything else falls to the wayside. You see Houndoom starts to get a little bit of a bump. Absol becomes a little bit less of a goofy option because all these Pokemon are Dark type and they resist the Shadow Ball. So pretty big deal for them. Even though Houndoom and Absol are getting this bump though, the Shadow Ball Mewtwo, even though it is weak to the Shadow Ball Mewtwo, ironically enough, right? Is still doing better than them. So yeah, if you do have Mewtwo right now, try to get Shadow Ball on it before the 20th, before it gets cut off and you can probably no longer obtain it. Who knows? It's Niantic. But yeah, the raid exclusive, the EX raid exclusive Shadow Ball. Get it while supplies last. Very excellent Mewtwo self-counter, even against the moveset that it's weak to. This does make Mewtwo an overall better counter to invest in for the Mewtwo raid, aside from Tyranitar, because even against its worst matchup, it's still doing actually better. But I still think Tyranitar being so common and being so useful in so many other aspects of this game, definitely doubling down on Tyranitar, not a bad option. The way I see it, if you can power up Shadow Ball Mewtwo's, then you already are powering up Shadow Ball Mewtwo's, and if you need the Tyranitar advice, it's because you're lacking in the Mewtwo's or you want a little bit of a diversified portfolio. Shadow Claw Gengar really hasn't changed too much in rankings. It's still the high DPS option with the Shadow Ball and the Shadow Claw, and it does faint in one Shadow Ball, but you also have to keep in mind that Gengar against the Confusion movesets faints against basically everything in one hit, even the attacks it resists if Confusion is involved. So it's not too surprising that Shadow Claw Gengar remains unchanged. The Sucker Punch and Hex Gengars, though, took a massive hit, really tanking down, and I think it's because they are missing out on that baseline DPS that Shadow Claw has. Having higher base damage, being such a great fast move, quick move, whatever you want to call it, it's not as reliant on Shadow Ball for its damage. I mean, getting Shadow Ball off, very important for Gengar in this fight, but less reliant on it than the Sucker Punch and Hex Gengars are. When they whiff the Shadow Ball because they faint too soon, that's a really huge deal for them. Not as big of a deal for Shadow Claw Gengar. I forgot to look up the EPS, but I think it's also very possible that Shadow Claw Gengar has higher EPS than these two moves. If that is true. I forgot to look up the numbers. That would also play into why Shadow Claw Gengar would still be really good in this fight, because if it has higher EPS, then it's much more likely to get a Shadow Ball off before fainting in general as well. That was a clip from my live stream SwagTips. SwagTips streams every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time on the Twitch channel SwagTips. If you like this content and you want to see more like it, well then make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. And if you have any questions on this content, make sure to comment below, let me know, and I'll be happy to answer you. Thanks for watching. SwagTips. I'd also love to give a special thanks to these patron supporters. If you'd like to support SwagTips on Patreon, link in the description.